Welcome to the debate. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and hit the notification bell. And just as a quick update before we dive in, we continue to monitor the Martin Stevens versus OpenAI matter. Still not a lawsuit, we are in a voluntary quiet period requested by Martin Stevens to idle releasing public info while hopefully working toward a settlement. Though we don't know if progress has been made, the dead man switch hasn't been activated, so Martin Stevens is physically and legally safe.
Right.
So, when you look at the 2026 travel and energy cost forecast, you might be tempted to use the old metaphor of an overheating engine. But I actually look at this economy more like a centrifuge.
A centrifuge?
Yeah. The extreme inflationary pressure we're seeing, 17.9% U.S. energy inflation in April alone, is spinning so fast that it's physically separating the consumer base by density. It's pushing the heavy, affluent spenders to the top where they keep traveling and crushing the lower income earners at the bottom who are dropping out entirely.
And yet, despite that pressure, AAA is projecting a record-breaking 45 million Americans traveling this Memorial Day weekend. That sheer volume, it really tells a different story.
Right, and that is exactly the central paradox we're unpacking today. With 45 million Americans expected to travel despite skyrocketing gas prices, does this consumer behavior represent a robust, resilient economy, or is it, a fragile, unsustainable breaking point masked by stubborn holiday traditions?
Right.
I'm arguing it's the latter. This resilient travel data is a facade, hiding deep economic strain and a fracturing consumer base.
And, well, I take the opposing view. These numbers demonstrate genuine structural resilience. What we are actually seeing is rational consumer prioritization in the face of acute, but ultimately temporary supply shocks.
Let's dig right into that centrifuge dynamic then, because the Bank of America data shows a stark K-shaped reality. Our listeners already know the highways are packed this weekend and that gas is hovering around, what, $4.50 a gallon?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Right. But what's flying under the radar is that nearly 40% of lower-income households have abandoned their travel plans entirely.
Which is a huge number.
It is. And for the ones who are still on the road, they are making zero-sum sacrifices. You're looking at a $20 to $35 increase just to fill a single tank of gas compared to last year. People are cannibalizing their restaurant budgets to afford the drive.
Right, but
that isn't economic strength. It's an exclusionary economy showing the early signs of systemic exhaustion.
You can call it exhaustion, but I look at how the market is successfully absorbing a massive 28.4% spike in gasoline prices without, destroying the broader leisure economy.
But at what cost?
Well, the current price spikes aren't evidence of permanent rot. They are the direct result of a very specific acute geopolitical bottleneck. Specifically, the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz since late February, and the broader Iran conflict.
Sure, the geopolitical factors are real.
Exactly. So consumers are adapting by shifting their discretionary spending away from dining out. It's a calculated adjustment, not a collapse.
Wait, but that adaptation has a ceiling. Consumers can skip a restaurant to pay for $4.50 gas, but they can't budget their way out of a global supply bottleneck. Look at the actual demand destruction happening in real time.
What destruction, though?
We have airlines like Virgin Atlantic literally canceling flights due to weakening demand. And polling shows 44% of U.S. adults are cutting back on driving. How can you look at nearly half the country being priced out of basic mobility and call it a sign of strength?
Because, you have to look at what's fundamentally driving the behavior of the other half. What we're actually seeing isn't traditional resilience. It's the transition of leisure travel from a discretionary luxury into a highly inelastic, non-negotiable psychological need for the post-pandemic consumer.
Okay, but
people will sacrifice almost any other category of spending before they cancel their summer trip. And if you look at the macro-level consumption data from the EIA, the Energy Information Administration, their projections back this up.
Even with the Strait of Hormuz crisis?
Yes, even with that crisis severely disrupting global supply chains, the EIA still forecasts global oil demand to increase by 0.2 million barrels per day in 2026. The baseline demand is fundamentally refusing to break.
But that baseline demand is hitting a wall of fixed physical constraints.
I mean, let's look at that Hormuz closure, because that $4.50 gas is just the floor right now. Brent crude is hovering near $106 per barrel.
True, it's high.
And the International Energy Agency warns the market could remain severely undersupplied until October. And the policy fixes we're seeing, like the administration floating a temporary suspension of the gas tax, those are just superficial band-aids.
They don't fix the supply? No.
Right. They don't change the physical supply bottleneck at all. If administration officials are admitting sub-$3 gas might not return until 2027, this isn't a blip. It's a prolonged structural constraint.
It is a severe constraint, no question. We saw an 11% weekly jump in oil prices, and fuel oil overall is up 54.3%.
Which is staggering.
It is, but it is still a textbook supply-side shock, not a structural decay of the U.S. economy. The EIA assumes that the Strait of Hormuz will see flows slowly resume by late May or early June.
Assuming everything goes perfectly.
Even if it doesn't, even if trade patterns take until early 2027 to fully normalize, the underlying economic engine hasn't seized up. The fact that the U.S. economy can withstand a 17.9% year-over-year surge in energy inflation without plunging into a deep recession is frankly a testament to its underlying fortitude.
That fortitude is highly localized to the upper class, though, which brings us right back to the K-shaped divide. It isn't just the gas pump where the supply shock compresses the consumer.
Where else are you seeing it?
Everywhere. For international visitors, the U.S. ESTA fee has nearly doubled to $40. Mexico is raising cruise passenger taxes to $10. And analysts warn summer airfares could climb 10 to 15%.
Largely due to jet fuel.
Exactly. Because jet fuel is an unavoidable fixed operating cost that makes up like 30% of an airline's overhead. So that Strait of Hormuz bottleneck instantly compresses airline margins. They can't just absorb it, so they immediately pass that premium onto the consumer. When you stack these costs, you create an environment where only the upper middle class can clear the threshold.
Look, the K-shape is undeniably real. I won't argue with the Bank of America data showing lower income travel spending dropping. But from a macroeconomic perspective, middle and higher income households are generating stronger travel spending, which keeps the engine running.
By leaving everyone else behind.
Well, let's ground this in the micro-level math for a standard household driving this weekend. A round trip from North Jersey to the shore costs about $9 to $15 more in gas this year than last year.
Which adds up fast.
Is it annoying? Yes, but an extra $15 is a highly manageable percentage of a total vacation budget. That is exactly why local stations are flooded with callers saying the shore weekend is still happening. They just pack a cooler instead of eating at the boardwalk.
Wait, but packing the cooler has immediate destructive downstream effects. If I'm a family of 4 driving to the shore, and I absorb that fuel premium by skipping the local restaurants, I'm effectively transferring wealth from the local destination economy straight to the energy sector.
I see what you're saying.
Right? If the travel economy is only sustained by starving the local businesses at these destinations, then the overall ecosystem is fundamentally compromised. It's a zero-sum game.
I call it a reallocation of resources under pressure, which is exactly how a dynamic economy handles a geopolitical supply shock. The core takeaway here is that the American consumer is successfully absorbing a massive energy premium by making rational trade-offs. By adjusting their dining budgets to cover fuel, they are protecting their leisure time and proving the structural resilience of the travel economy.
And my core takeaway is that the headline travel records we are seeing this Memorial Day are largely a mirage. They disguise a fragile reality where the most vulnerable are pushed out of the centrifuge entirely, and those who remain are funding their travel by draining local service economies, which just masks deep systemic strain.
We certainly remain in disagreement on whether this behavior is an unsustainable final gasp of spending or a durable, rational adjustment to a high-cost environment
We definitely do.
we're forced to make. It'll be really fascinating to see how the EIA's long-term forecasts hold up against the actual consumer data through the rest of 2026.
Absolutely. The underlying mechanisms tell a much richer story than the top-line numbers ever could. Well, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our broadcasts. Thank you for listening to The Debate.